My people, brothers and sisters of the Sahel, lend me your ears and take these words as if they were a promise passed from one palm to another. I am Ibrahimtraoré, a son of this soil, shaped by its dust and sun, raised by its hardships and its quiet joys. I have walked the same paths your feet have worn, slept beside the same fires that kept our nights company, and listened to the same lullabies that once promised our children a safer dawn. For too long the Sahel has been spoken of as if it were a sentence cursed, hopeless, a region defined by its wounds rather than its people. Men in faraway rooms called our lives statistics. They debated our fate like chess pieces, then folded their hands and left the board. They smiled in photo ops and left behind promises that evaporated under our heat. They brought troops and speeches and then left us with more questions than answers. They claimed to protect us while our daughters and sons continued to be taken, our markets emptied, our schools burned. I have seen villages turn to ash, mothers who could no longer sing because their voices had been stolen by grief, fathers whose hands trembled as they dug the earth for the graves of their children. I carry all those pictures in my memory. They are the reasons I stand before you now. I will not speak to flatter foreign audiences or to soothe distant editors eager for a tidy narrative. I will speak to you, the people who wake before dawn to coax food from the soil, the merchants who set out when the roads are still cool, the mothers who count their children's breaths at night and pray for a morning when fear will not be the first guest at the table. This is our story. We write it with our blood and with our labor. It is the story of how, in the face of abandonment, we decided not to wait. It is the story of how we stopped letting our destiny be parceled out to other people's agendas. For years, we were told to wait. Wait for peacekeepers. Wait for aid convoys. Wait for the next mission whose leaders would speak in lofty terms and leave in private jets. Waiting became a religion that demanded only patience and delivered only more funerals. I watched young men and women, full of curiosity and hunger, lose the restless fire in their eyes. I watched markets grow quieter, schools close their doors, and entire neighborhoods become maps of grief. We were taught to believe that without the guidance of others, we could not rise. But we learned the hardest lesson. The hands that lift you can also bind you. So we chose another path. In October 2025, on the harsh plains near Tindiban, something shifted, not because the earth tilted, but because we did. We would no longer be the subjects of a benevolent lecture. We would be the authors of our salvation. What began as whispers among our intelligence officers, those who know the rivers, the termite mounds, the patterns of night movement better than any outsider ever could, grew into a plan forged by the people who bear the scars of this land. We were not inspired by the flash of foreign technology alone. We were inspired by the belief that our brains, our courage, our unity could be marshaled for the defense of our homes. We gathered in small rooms with no banners, no translators, no foreign advisors steering our choices. It was the Sahel speaking to itself. From Bamako to Ouagadougou to Niamey, the men and women who have always been our first line of defense came together. Engineers who taught themselves how to shape tools from what was available. Young technicians who stayed awake nights to stitch networks from thin signals. Soldiers who had learned the language of sand and shadow, they all joined. We combined local knowledge with ingenuity, and we set a new standard for how a region can defend itself, not for some trophy, but so that mothers can sleep without the sound of gunfire ringing in their ears. We designed our operations around three principles: intelligence, mobility, unity. Those are not empty words. They are a doctrine born of our pain and our learning. Intelligence means information gathered by our people, for our people, not the kind filtered through foreign priorities, but information that understands where children play, where the market opens, where a single road shapes the life of a dozen villages. Mobility means using our knowledge of the land to move swiftly, unpredictably, to ensure that terror could not hide in the folds of familiarity. Unity means three nations standing not as isolated islands begging for aid, but as a single body that refuses to be divided by the profit of others or by the lie that we cannot help each other. On the morning the operation began, the desert did not roar. It obeyed the law of silence. The first sounds the enemy heard were not shouts from a foreign commander, but the coordinated, precise actions of our own forces, a choreography of men and women who had decided that the time for feeling powerless was over. We struck where their mobility mattered most. We cut supply lines. We denied them the ability to move and terrorize as they once had. The assaults were guided by the eyes we had placed in the sky, drones built, maintained, and piloted by our engineers and by the patient work of scouts who had walked those sands for years. We did not throw our children recklessly into harm's way. We planned with the discipline of those who have examined loss and resolved not to repeat it. When the dust settled, what remained on that battlefield were objects that told a story, broken vehicles, burned encampments, and most importantly, documents and devices that revealed the networks behind the violence. Those papers and the data within them were not trophies for the proud. They were keys that would close doors on future attacks. They exposed connections that stretched far beyond our borders and showed us how to guard against the next attempt to destroy what we build. The victory was not about a score of fallen enemies. It was about protecting our villages, our markets, our schools. And, by the grace of God and by the careful planning of our people, not a single AES soldier was lost in that operation. For a region that watched its young disappear for years, such a result felt like a miracle, the miracle of careful, human-centered planning. What followed was not just the cheering of a people relieved to feel safe again. It was a change in the way people moved through life. Traders returned to caravans that had been stalled for years. Children who had been kept out of school walked again toward classrooms with bundled notebooks. Refugees, men and women who had fled under the shroud of night, came home with cautious but determined steps. Farmers returned to their fields, touched the soil, and planted seeds for a future they had not yet seen but dared to imagine. Young people who once saw their only future as departure to foreign shores began gathering, curious to learn how they could help rebuild rather than run away. Across the continent, our actions sent a message. We will not be permanent beneficiaries of other people's charity in matters of life and death. The world reacted. Newspapers in Paris and produced in other capitals asked how 3 nations could accomplish in 48 hours what they had labeled impossible for decades. Analysts in grand studios tilted their heads, trying to fit us into templates that were never meant to contain our reality. Some whispered about hidden patrons, shady foreign partnerships. But this victory had no hidden masters. Our help came from our past, from ancestors who taught us how to read the land, from mothers who taught us patience and persistence, from young engineers who refused to be told what they could not build. Yet even as pride flowed through town squares and marketplaces, I knew the struggle had only begun. Victory on a battlefield is not the end of a war against the forces that profit from our suffering. Sanctions, diplomatic pressure, and propaganda still seek to bend us toward dependence. Old powers whose interests were once served by our weakness watch closely, searching for a fault line to exploit. Their tools are many: money, influence, deceit, and the cunning ability to turn allies into adversaries with whispers and promises. They cannot understand that we are not a commodity to be managed. We are people who love our land and want it thriving, not parceled out to external ambitions. So the next phase of our work is not simply military, it is reconstruction and reconciliation. We will build markets where bombs used to fall, schools where soldiers once patrolled, clinics where bullets once echoed. We will replace the language of fear with the language of enterprise. Where a road was blocked by violence, we will open trade and let dignity travel with the goods on the trucks that move again. We will reconstruct not in a way that mimics foreign models, but in a way that is rooted in our villages, in our customs, in the intelligence that guided our victory. We also must guard against the most dangerous enemy, division. They will try to buy us with gifts that aim to splinter our unity. They will lure leaders with bribes, flatterations, or profiteering projects that only deepen dependency. We must be vigilant and refuse to become a mosaic of interests dictated by those who prosper from our fracture. The future we seek is one of shared prosperity, where resources are used to educate children, to heal the sick, to build irrigation that makes arid land yield food again. In every campus and in every marketplace across the continent, our action at Tindiban has sparked debate and a new kind of hope. Students write papers that consider whether the future of our defense must be African-driven and African-designed. Professors in lecture halls invoke our doctrine as a study in self-reliance. Artists paint murals that feature not just faces but the philosophy of a people who decided to build rather than beg. From Lagos to Nairobi, from Accra to Cairo, people whisper and shout alike, "Africa fights for Africa." That phrase is not a slogan for exclusion. It is an invocation of capacity and care. It insists that we can protect our own and that we can choose the terms of our peace. I have met mothers whose faces hold the map of grief and hope at once. Among them was a widow named Mariam, who carried a photograph like a map of the life she once shared. She told us softly that now her husband could rest. He did not die in vain. For me, those words were not a victory lap. They were a solemn reminder of why we took risks and bore burdens. We do this for those who can no longer speak for themselves, for their names, their laughter, the little acts of ordinary life that deserve the dignity of being safe. But hear me plainly. This is not an invitation to triumphalism. There are challenges ahead. Economic sanctions bite at our ability to trade, to import medicines, to invest in schools. False narratives will be spun to accuse us of aggression while they ignore the crimes that made our action necessary. The hunters who once profited from our dependency will attempt to regain footing. They will try to reframe our self-determination as a threat. We must stand against that with the clarity of our purpose and the breadth of our compassion. We will reject offers that come wrapped in strings and chains. We will seek partners who respect our sovereignty and assistance that strengthens our ability to stand on our own feet. To the youth who look at Tindiban and see a symbol, do not seek only glory. Seek to learn. Enlist in rebuilding, not just in arms. Study engineering, logistics, agriculture, governance. Learn to run schools and clinics and markets with the same discipline we showed in battle. To the soldiers who stood with me, keep your honor. Our people put their trust in you, not to be conquerors, but to be guardians. To regional partners, our victory at Tindiban is a call to collective responsibility. The Sahel's security is not a local problem alone. It is a continental and global one. But any help we accept must accept our dignity and our right to self-determination. We are building institutions now, a joint council for security that does not take orders from outside, but listens to the counsel of those who are affected by decisions. We are training officers and engineers, sharing doctrine and knowledge, building a network of mutual aid that reaches villages as well as capitals. We are reorienting trade corridors and investing in agricultural programs that will make famine less likely and hope more durable. These are the true spoils of victory, not the capture of a place, but the restoration of life and the design of a future where children play without counting the sounds of distant engines. And to the world who watches us, understand this. Our hunger for autonomy is not born of hatred for others, but of love for ourselves. We want to be partners, not dependents. We want cooperation grounded in mutual respect. We will not apologize for defending our people. We will not apologize for building a future that is ours to make. Let this be an invitation. Help us build schools, hospitals, infrastructure, but not as benefactors who claim ownership of our choices. Help us as equals. I tell you these things not for applause, not for headlines, but for the record of our people. Let it be known that when the Sahel rose, it did so with dignity. Let it be recalled that we chose unity over division, intelligence over chaos, mobility over passivity. Let it be remembered that our victory was never merely military, it was moral. It declared that we will not be residuals in other people's narratives. We are authors of our destiny.
So stand with me, my people. Stand not because I ask you to follow a man, but because I ask you to follow the truth, that we are capable, that we are deserving, that we can rebuild and renew. Plant the seeds of a society where our children can learn and play, where markets hum with trade, where songs of harvest replace songs of mourning. When our people from other lands ask what changed, tell them this. We decided to stop waiting. We chose each other. We acted with prudence and with courage. We fought not for conquest, but for returning life to the places that had been hollowed out by fear. If these words touch your heart, carry them forward. Share them in the market, in the mosque, in the schoolyard. Teach the children the 3 words we hold dear: intelligence, mobility, unity, not as a chant, but as a way of structuring our lives, so that terror finds no shelter and our communities flourish. History will remember this moment not because of a single man or a single day, but because of a people who decided to claim their story back. This is my promise to you from the depth of my being. We will labor for peace and build for prosperity. We will turn battlefields into marketplaces, watchtowers into libraries, and patrol routes into paths to school. We will do this together, with pride and with humility, remembering always the faces of those who paid for our freedom. The awakening has begun. The Sahel breathes again. Let no one tell you we were ever helpless. We only needed to remember who we are.